Good. Right. Okay, so just make yourself comfortable in the chair. As always, take your time, settle in. Have your feet flat on the floor if you possibly can. Remember, you can always build up if you've got something like I saw one of these press foam yoga blocks, as they call them, or something similar. Sitting upright, and if possible, sitting forward if it's not uncomfortable for you. A little bit of weight in your feet. So if you're experienced with this, it's a familiar posture and a familiar feeling. We would tend to associate the postures with certain feelings in the same way as we might associate a particular place, or maybe a book, or maybe a meal or something like that with particular qualities. So coming into the posture can be a way to kind of invoke that kind of sense of stillness, the sense of spaciousness, if not purely in your body, but certainly in your mind and in your intent. If you're watching this and you're new to it, then give yourself a chance just to appreciate the posture. Think about how your body's being supported through your feet, your legs, through the chair, your hips, front of your body supported through your back. So just trying to let go of any kind of tightness in your belly, your solar plexus, your chest. What we often find is when we do this kind of thing, we will sort of like think, oh yeah, I'm pulling my belly in or something like that, and you relax it, and then 2 minutes later you notice it's come back in. These old habits don't just disappear, but we learn to notice them, and when we notice them, quite often we get to a point where it's almost like they've been caught out and they just go away again for a little while. And then this sense of being supported from within, your area, your skeleton, your spine, your pelvis, the bones of your legs. And a lot of this comes out of this ability to just settle. And again, that can be quite difficult. We sort of let ourselves drop down and then suddenly jerk back up, especially in an upright position like this. And now just sit back in your chair, put your feet out into the reclining position. This helps us to focus on this quality of settling in, releasing, letting go. Relaxing is part of it. They're all words that we would find in an understanding of the Chinese term sung. And it's when we're able to do that we start to appreciate what else is going on. When we get through the kind of tightness and stiffness, that's when, again, we start to recognize in this posture, particularly the chair, the weight of our body sinking into the chair. And you're probably quite comfortable in your chair, but sometimes if you go into a cafe or something like that, and you go to sit down, there's always a few moments where you're sort of testing the chair. But as you gaining confidence in that, then the settling comes easier. And in the same way as you gaining confidence in what's going on in your body, that you'll be able to kind of access that support, that natural support, without the tightness. You may notice changes in your breathing. You may notice, you're maybe more aware of your heartbeat, of your circulation. There's little sort of pointers, but they don't always come up. You don't always notice those, but there are certain references you can make. So now coming back to the upright position, and again, you don't have to be a long way forwards. Again, settling in. So we've got this stronger, denser feeling deeper into our body. And one of the things we want to do in the practice is to kind of cultivate that feeling so we feel it more through the whole of the body. Phrase often used in Tai Chi is that outside there's the softness of cotton, because cotton is a soft material, but also very resilient. And inside, the temper of steel. Steel is metal, it's quite strong, but in metallic terms is quite soft. Think of a balloon, and if you push your finger into a balloon, you'll gradually meet more and more resistance, but it would never be hard, it would never be stiff. And one of the ways we develop that is through this image that we often carry in Tai Chi of moving through water. It's a very apt image. It helps with the flow, but it also helps to develop the kind of inner strength, the tone of the soft tissue in particular that we're looking for. And then just turning your head gently from side to side, noticing how that makes a difference. So as soon as we start moving, then this posture and the qualities associated with it get a little bit harder to maintain. As soon as we introduce the notion of change. And one of the sort of ongoing processes, I think, in Tai Chi is learning how to maintain these feelings of quietness, of stillness, of inner strength, spaciousness. Well, we are in movement. So starting off with very simple movements and gradually building into more complex ones. And the key to that really comes back to that quality of sung. When we meet the barrier, which we will do, or when we feel that a movement is taking us offline, we try and settle again, we try and release again. Hands in front of the shoulders and just circling your elbows around. Just taking note of where you feel the movement. Obviously in your shoulders, but where else in your body, chest, upper back, sides. Give them the sense that when you make a movement in one part of your body, there's a feeling of resonance, a feeling of connection to other parts of the body. And then going forwards. Let your hands come down to your sides. Rotating your arms. When you do this, try and just be aware of the sort of tone of the muscles in your arms. You're winding them around, so obviously there's going to be a bit of a pull there, but you don't want it to sort of grip. You don't want it to tighten as though you're tying a knot in your arm. And so as you turn, we want in the back of our mind this quality of sung again, releasing. And when that ceases to work, we've gone as far as we can at that point. And then winding around. And back the other way. Sometimes said in Tai Chi that we go to 80% of the full movement. If you go to the full movement, inevitably there'll be some tightening and a reduction of the space for movement and for the flow of the energy. Rest your hands down. Now, just tilting forward in your pelvis. I mentioned earlier, we can start to recognize that when we move in one part of the body, other parts of the body engage. When we move in the center of the body, actually it affects the whole body. You can feel your weight going down into your feet. You can feel your shoulders moving. And if I were to hold my arms out, my arms would move. You might even find that your hands are sliding up and down your legs a little bit, or your elbows are bending more. So to begin to cultivate this sense of your whole body moving as one unit, body and mind really moving as one unit, a good place to focus is this center part of the body and how it sinks into the ground, connects to feet, legs, and to the ground itself. And then just turn a little. Turn the other way. And then moving in your hips and your pelvis, just drawing your head and shoulders around and feeling your weight move as well from foot to foot, from hip to hip and between feet and hips. Back the other way. And back to the center. Step forward with one foot, put the heel down, lower the toes. Don't make it too long a step and just see if you can apply a little bit of pressure. So you're just stepping onto sand and you push your foot in to leave a slightly deeper footprint. And again, getting that sense of a connection to the ground through the sole of your foot. And then on the other side, and bring your feet back under it. Just center my chair. Going back to what I was just saying about moving to 80% of the full movement, we're not trying to stretch. We're focusing on the movement. Stretching can be a good thing to do. Not usually while you're moving, for one thing. Another thing is to retain this sense of spaciousness in the body for the internal movement, the flow of your blood and so on, and the sense of the movement, the flow of the energy that we begin to associate with these movements. A friend of mine who's a physiotherapist and works a lot with people in chronic pain described it as the soft boundary. And I think that's a useful way of thinking of it. So if I hold my arm out here, then this is the soft boundary. About there is as far as I can go without that tightening settling in. If I go right out there, this is the hard boundary. So in Tai Chi, we're told, we work to the soft boundary. And that means that although we're only going to 80% of the movement, we still have a boundary and we still have some potential for expanding that boundary. So I might get to there and think, maybe I can go a little bit further. And the way I would go further, I'm exaggerating this, of course. If you watch my shoulder, I sort of allow my shoulder to drop a little bit, allow the elbow to drop and the muscles to soften. And sometimes I will get a little bit more movement. So again, we apply this quality of sum, releasing, letting go, and so on. And sometimes that will just sort of push the boundary out, but it's still only 80% of the full movement. So this is not a suggestion that we shouldn't try to move further. It's more an indication of how we look for that increase in our range of movement. And that can apply any time to any of the exercises. So now, with your weight predominantly back in your hips, turn your hands palm forwards. Once again, tilt forwards, and as you do, make this rotation in your arms that we did before. The bird folds its wings. Trying to maintain focus of attention into that center part of our body between hips and waist. The feeling of that part of the body sinking into the chair when your weight is back, sinking down through your legs into your feet when you go forwards, feeling that downwards connection. And also how when you do tilt the pelvis, the spine moves, your shoulders move, your arms move. There's the connection upwards. And then palms facing back, fisherman castanet. Easing forwards, drawing your arms through, and then back. We learn to maintain as much as possible a constant link in our minds to this center part of the body. A link that we can come back to as a way of just settling, of quietening. And that area of the body is sometimes described as the hub of a wheel. When a wheel turns, all the spokes follow. It touches all parts of the wheel. But the hub itself has an element of stillness in it. So here, it's sometimes referred to as the lower dantian, becomes the place that we bring our attention back to, just to remind ourselves of that feeling of what we refer to in Tai Chi as the stillness within the movement. And rolling the ball. As you get used to the movements, there's various ways that we can begin to imagine them, to understand them, various images, various similes, if you like, various frameworks. One interesting one is to think in terms that there's always these two stages. There's an expanding stage and a contracting stage. And we could think again of that center part of the body as the point that the expansion moves out from, moving downwards into our feet, upwards into our shoulders, and then returns to. So even as our arms, maybe our shoulders and head are going up, we get a stronger feeling of a downward, rooting down movement. Do one more of these. Starting the next movement the same manner. As your hands come up, turn them palm in. Just pigeon spreads its wings. Then the chest just open and close. So what I just described is that sort of basic rhythm of expansion and contraction, maybe sort of originating and returning to the center of your body, underpins the whole system. But we also begin to notice different movements, invoke different patterns, movement, and energy in the body. This is a good one to really feel that sense of movement in chest and upper back. One more time. This time from the forward position, keep your hands in line with your hip, elbows go out a little bit, and press forwards. Just let your hands swing up, push and wave. On the side, if you look at the broad shape of my arm, there, the elbow will go out a little bit, but as I go forward, my elbow just drops in, and that curve in the arm means that when the hand is pushed forward, there's a natural curve up. Try not to think in terms of having to lift your hands. This is another thing that relates to that quality of song, and what we often refer to in Tai Chi is moving through the path of least resistance, like water flowing down a hill and flowing around the obstruction. One more time. That fist in your hands, loose fist. Now your hands go straight out, again from the side, they rotate, and then back. So don't bring your elbows back too far. This is a lot of the movement backwards gets absorbed into this spiraling movement, and then the release. There's no lifting here. So here, your elbow will change angle. Here, it's quite a strong angle, more, almost 90 degrees. But here, it becomes quite shallow. And then back. It's like a spring releasing. You can press the spring and push forward. This is said to be a good exercise for our shoulders because we want that rotation to go right in to our shoulders. Just only go forwards, open your fingers and go back to pigeon spread wings. And do a sequence of 3. We do a pigeon spreads its wings and push and wave. And then punch with both fists. And back to pigeon spreads its wings. So it's nice to get that sense of a flow from one movement to another. Try not to hurry that change. Just see if you can get a sense for what I was talking about earlier, that there's an underlying rhythm, an underlying pattern for all the movements. but also each individual movement will have its own little distinctions within your body. Those very small changes are often the ones most directly affected by our intentions, our images, and so on. So it's interesting to consider, the change is as much a change in intent as it is a kind of physical change. One more time. So intent is where, in a sense, our mind gives instructions to our body. Instructions is probably too strong a term. It does so in many different ways, and it can have a very direct influence on our body. This time, turning your hands out, winding around, pressing forward. This time, turning your hands palm down, turn your body a little bit east forward, just put the lengthening through your back, extending in to your arms and fingers, swing round, so you're rolling the ball around. The exercise is actually called polishing the table. Again, it comes from your center, your hips, your pelvis, your waist. And again, we have that sense of an expansion and then a contraction. You can just focus a little bit more on what's happening in your back and your spine, that gentle lengthening through your back and spine, followed by contraction back, and then going the other way, the lengthening. Really subtle, but it's not stretched by any means. Back. A couple more times. Just let your hands rest from them. So that lengthening comes because there's a very gentle, what we might call a push from our hips and from our feet. It's just a very gentle pulsing movement, not straining for that. What we're going to try and do now is reproduce that in a more upright position. So a gentle press down through your feet and your hips, or if you prefer, an expansion in the center of your body that pushes downwards and upwards. And just see if you can get that sense of how that pushes up into your shoulders and your head. If we did it somewhat more dramatically, it would be a process of standing up. But you're just looking for that very subtle wave-like movement up and down your spine. Bring your hands around and just let the wave move your hands as though you're lifting the ball up and pressing it down. When I talk about these things, a lot of these movements are internal, which is why I often exaggerate them so you can see them. But for instance, that expansion and contraction through your spine is generally not seen. I mean, there might be a slight raising or pushing up on my head, but generally speaking, this is something that is felt, not seen. But one of the ways to begin to get those feelings is to actually do the movements bigger. So the tendency as we progress in Tai Chi is for the movements to become a bit smaller, a bit quieter in our arms and our shoulders and our legs, our back. And again, that then feeds back into our attention, more aware of even more subtle changes within the body and so on and so forth. Your hands come down this time and pushing your arms out. The wild goose. Maybe the image of the bird in flight, very graceful, quite strong, very fluid and rhythmic. Conveys some kind of quality. Not every image is going to work for you, of course. Some may work some at the time, some may not mean much, but maybe later, maybe in a few months or years, that image will come back to you with a fresh meaning. This is not at all unusual. The image of moving through water isn't a helpful one to you. Imagine you have a feather in your hand and you're waving the feather up and down, and that slight sense of resistance, once again, is what we're looking for. Remember, the air, although we don't really notice it, does have a certain amount of resistance. Coming forwards, sit back into your hips, push up again. This time your arms circling around. And this time, again, I can only do it with one arm because of the chair, but I'll show you from the side. As I come up, my arm will begin to rotate. And so it's the narrowest part of the arm that begins to move through that resistance. Once again, finding the path of least resistance. This part in the clouds. Lovely expansive feeling through belly, solar plexus, chest and ribs, and then contracting back in. And expansion building into your arms and your hands and your fingers. Notice that my elbows are still quite bent here. I'm not reaching a long way up. Now, letting your hands drop down. Feeling the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. Now the expansion is first felt through one side of your body. And again, this is where our intent comes in. The instruction, if you like to think of it like that, goes to one side of your body to expand. Discover that our bodies are quite good at following tension. Just dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Take your time finishing this one, but when you do, just bring your hands in, over slightly above your legs, and this time as you press up, let your arms rotate and just a little bit above your head if that's comfortable. And then pushing out to the sides. Yeah, from the side, and again, it would just be with one hand, or mostly with one hand. Yeah, you can see my hand is just slightly in front of my body. Likewise here, something like to my ring or little or middle finger, kind of in line the way over rather than pulled back. Again, we start to get this unhurried, very gentle, very natural rhythm of expansion and contraction, gradually building. One more round. Push out. Extend one foot, knees still a bit bent, heel is on the ground. And scoop forward as though you're scooping water up in your arms. Let your hips drop back. Feel that drawing on your shoulders and your head, and then your arms. So coming up nice and easy without straining in your shoulders, your upper back, your chest, or your arms. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Change over. Same thing. First of all, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Come back to the sitting position. We use intent all the time on many different levels, on unconscious intents, like when we go to open our door, we put the key in the door and we turn. There's an intention behind that, but we're not thinking, oh, I must put the key in the door or whatever. Sometimes it's more conscious intent. Sometimes those intentions are conditioned from outside. Advertisers do this all the time. They use imagery to create sensations within the body, to intend us to go and buy that chocolate bar or whatever. Tai Chi tries to make active use of that intent. So when we started to develop that ability to settle our thoughts, and remember that we can focus into our body or particular parts of our body, and develop a kind of still point from which we can observe, then we can begin to apply that intent. When we can see clearly, we can begin to plot those paths of least resistance and and so on and so forth. So the cultivation of that stillness of mind, that quality of being able to observe is a worthy end in its own right, and a valuable thing to be able to do, to give us that quietness, that stillness, that space that can be so elusive. But it's also a stepping stone towards being able to be a bit more aware of and pay a bit more attention to our movements, to get the correct movements and so on and so forth, to even sort of, to direct the flow of the movement in our body. You think back to the sequence that we did, the change from one movement to another is this interesting and curious combination of mind and body, to the extent that the actual idea that there's a mind that is separate from the body is nonsensical. Now, just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, your arm. The other side. Your belly. And finally your legs. Resting your hand and then pushing your heels up, feeling the muscles of your legs. And then circling around. And back the other way. And then standing. Remember, you can always rest and sit if you feel that you need to. Oh, use the chair for some kind of support. Have your feet hip width apart. And begin to just look for this feeling again of your hips sinking. It's more obvious here, really. So if we were able to feel that sense of releasing of our hips sinking into the chair, and then the expansion upwards that comes as a result of that, whether we're thinking of the legs or this compression expansion in the upper part of the body, we have a memory of a feeling, a movement, and that becomes part of our intention. So we can begin to apply that sense of contraction and then that sense of expansion. And then bringing your arms into the movement, doing these three movements as a little sequence once again. So again, intention works on many different levels. And we want things like that sense of sinking into the ground and rooting down to become not something we have to sort of consciously and deliberately think about all the time. We're doing it now a little bit, but we don't want to have to walk down the road thinking all the time, yeah, my hips are still sinking and so on and so forth, any more than we walk down the road thinking deliberately about our shoelaces or anything like that. And with practice, those sorts of intentions become familiar and habitual. Going back to rooting down. Just focus on the change. The change physical change, of course, and particularly those of you more familiar with the movements, you know what's coming, you're familiar with the pattern, so there's that change of intention once again. This is why we think of Tai Chi as a moving meditation. Go ahead and let your hands drop down. And when we change our stance, so keep the width of your step. The step forward is about the same in length, and just as we did in the chair, we begin to move our weight, this time very much from leg to leg. But don't lose that background intention of releasing into the ground. So it's almost, and this again, this is very exaggerated. So it's like I go back and then I drop down. And as I drop down, I experience the push up, and that pushes me forwards, and I drop down. Except that you wouldn't see it. It's a very much an internal feeling to do with those sensations of releasing. But the intent is there, hopefully, or ideally, each time we transfer the weight, to give a little bit of time for that settling in. It's a tall order to feel it all the time, by the way. But what can often happen is if we practice this, we begin to notice sometimes that we're not releasing in the hips, that we're not rooting down. And so again, like the shoelaces, we don't walk along the road thinking, oh, my shoelaces are done up. Then you suddenly notice that the laces are come undone. So intention can also be related to feelings that become very familiar within the body, intending to maintain that familiarity, and then maybe consciously doing something about it, or even subconsciously doing something about it when that feeling isn't there. And as you settle into your back foot, just let your front toes lift a little bit. You can turn the front foot out a little bit. Go forwards, push the back knee forwards. So more and more of your weight will settle into each leg. This is quite difficult because it requires more effort in terms of releasing, in terms of letting go. And so what we've done is, moving from the chair to standing, and then to the transfer of the weight, and then to increasing that, is we're going through the same process, but each stage is just a little bit more challenging, a little bit more difficult than the previous one. So take your time with this, and do as always. If you feel you might, it can be very useful to have that bit of support so you can focus on the releasing and then stepping in. Where also bringing a sense of attention and intention to just a general feel of your posture. Do you still have that feeling of spaciousness within your body, for instance? Can you feel that your body's sort of got that tonal quality I described? Try on the other side. And it's a bit like if you ride a bike, you drive a car, even if you walk down the road, you never go in a straight line. So as you move, you maybe your shoulder goes out of line a little bit, and you correct it, and then something else goes out of line. It sounds exhausting, but you gradually get used to that. Just like if you were driving the car, to start off with it, oh, good, this, good, and it's just natural to keep the car or the bike in some sense of what we might call equilibrium. And in the same way, there's an intention and a physical response that helps to keep our body not completely in equilibrium, but not verging too far. Raising your toes, your heel. And again, as we progress through the different exercises, that becomes a bit more challenging. And that's quite deliberate, by the way. It's just a little bit of a challenge. If we can meet that challenge and sort of move through it, then it means we're getting better at doing these things. Stepping in. So if you haven't done this much before, this is probably quite quick. Maybe moving your foot a bit quick. But you've been doing this for a while, as some you have. You can take it quite slowly and so on. And again, that's more difficult. Now this time, take a step through, either forwards or backwards, or whichever direction you've got the most space in. Change direction. Now have your right foot forwards. Start with your weight back, move your weight forwards and turn a little bit to your left and let that swing your arms out, sinking into the front foot, sit back, sinking into the back foot. This is wind blows the willows. The body contracts and expands. You may even feel that little bit of extension and contraction that we felt earlier in the chair in the spine and back. Very, very subtle. Sometimes just remembering that is something, remember how that felt and think, oh, it's happening here as well, maybe. The wind blows the willows. Nice and easy, turning in the center of your body. And then change to having your left foot forwards again, starting in your back leg, moving forwards, turning to your right. This time, just turn the front foot out a little bit, very carefully, going into dragonfly skims to water. Bring your foot in, and if from here you're comfortable, you can just raise the foot. If it feels wobbly to raise the foot, just keep the foot on the floor. You can always practice this. You can always practice the stability on one leg. It's quite a challenging exercise again. And then changing direction. One more time. Bring your feet down. Good. Now go back to your chairs. So this is the last class of the year. A big thank you to everybody who's attended the classes or caught up with the sessions on the YouTube channel. There'll be a couple of sessions go up over the next few days on the YouTube channel. I'll probably put one up in between Christmas and New Year. So if you feel like you need a little break from whatever's going on, then hopefully that will help. So keep your eye open for that. As always, you don't have to do the whole session. Just pick and choose. Have a lovely break, and I shall look forward to seeing you. The first of these classes of the year will be 2 o'clock on the 4th of January, just a few days after the new year, and then we'll be back into our regular routine. So have a lovely Christmas, everybody, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, or however you spend the festivities. And we talk a lot about, silent nights and so on and so forth at this time of year while everybody's dashing around. This last exercise, the intention is very, very strongly to settle, to come back to that point of stillness, quietness in mind and body. So embrace tiger, return to mountain. Bring your arms around as though you're holding the ball against your chest, drawing in, feeling your hips sink, shoulders sink, hands follow. And just for a moment, everything's settling. One more time. And then rest. Lovely. Thank you again, everybody. Have a lovely break.
Oh,